Setting the right rent price isn't about covering your costs. It's about maximizing profitability without scaring away quality tenants. A well-priced rental attracts reliable tenants quickly while ensuring your investment generates strong returns. But if you underprice, you lose money. Overprice, and your property sits vacant. In this episode, let's figure out how to strike the perfect balance. I would say that determining the rental price is the single most important aspect of a rental property. I get, if I were not exaggerating, hundreds of inquiries in our rental management company each month on what something could be worth in rent. When you think about it, if you already have a property and you're a landlord, you're wondering, how much should I charge in rent? If you are thinking about buying a property, you're going to be wondering, how much should I ask for rent? Now, where can you go to find this out? Now, I used to be a realtor, and no disrespect to realtors, but I would not listen to my realtor if I'm asking them how much can this rent for. No different than I'm a professional property manager. I would not want to give an opinion on how much I could sell somebody's rental property for because I am not an expert in that any longer, right? When we are providing a market rental analysis for somebody, there's a lot of work that goes into it. It's very similar to a property appraisal. You need to go and look at what's on the market right now. You need to look at comps, comparables of the last 30, 60, 90, 120 days. No different than when I was trying to set a listing price when I used to be a realtor. You know, if you set the rent too low in one property, and, depending what province or state you're in, you might not be able to adjust it later. On the other hand, and this is what I call the math problem, if you have it too high, how long are you willing to keep the property vacant in order to get your rent? And I'll explain. Let's say that you think your property is worth $2,000, okay? $24,000 a year in rent. And the market, I don't know, maybe I tell you, maybe you're one of my clients, I tell you that it's only going to be $1,700. So for $300, you stick to your guns and you try to rent it out. Now, how long is it going to take? Even if it takes you 3 months to get your $2,000, that now cost you $6,000 of your $2,000 rent. Or if I had, let's say that I was right and it was worth $1,700, now you're losing $300 or $3,600 for the year. But I don't think, that's maybe an extreme example. We could just be dealing with $100 worth, which is $1,200 for the year. And you losing, again, 2 or 3 months worth of rent. So now you're dealing with the difference between $6,000 and $1,200, meaning you don't want to lower your rent by $100 and lose quote unquote $1,200, and that you've already lost $6,000 in rent because it's been vacant. Plus, right, we're not just talking about rent, holding costs, mortgage, property tax, insurance. Oh, it's been vacant for 3 months. Maybe the insurance puts an extra rider on that. So that's hundreds of dollars for a vacancy rider. Maybe something happens, right? There's all these increased risks when you have to take that into consideration. So how do you determine the right rental price? Well, you want to research comparable properties. I just said that doing a comparative market assessment, a CMA, for rent is very similar to what a professional real estate appraiser will do for your bank when you're purchasing something or refinancing it. So you want to check rental listings in your area for similar properties. And I'm not talking about just in your city or town. I'm talking about the neighborhood. Now, you also, I'll put a footnote here though. Just because you see your property, a property similar to yours in your neighborhood, advertising for $2,500 doesn't mean that that's the true price. That is what that landlord wants, that property manager, that owner wants to get into for $2,500. What's a better actual indication? Again, I'm going to compare it to selling something as a realtor, okay? If you were to list your property and you want to list it for $400,000 and your realtor says, well, there are 10 properties listed for $400,000 in your area, I suggest we go for $400,000. But that realtor's not doing you any favors because, again, that's the wish list of everybody else in that area that currently has a property for sale. You want to go with history. What were the last 10 properties what did in the last month give me 10 properties that sold in my area, and it's not 400, it might be 385, 366, 369. And now you find out that the magic sort of sweet spot for your property is 379.9, not 400,000. And now, I mean, so that's doing proper research, no different than rental prices. So you should be checking listings in your area, but you really want to look at historical listings, okay? Meaning, and how do you find that? Well, maybe you have friends and associates that you can look at. Maybe there's some, I know there's a lot of services out there. Maybe you're going to contact our company for a free market rent assessment. We do provide that. And what we're looking at also are properties, because we manage thousands of properties or have managed thousands over the last 25 years, looking for properties in that area that are currently renting, not what somebody wants to get, but currently renting. And then the second question is, okay, we have a tenant at 1,500 in the same neighborhood. When did they move in? Maybe they moved in when the vacancy rate was 5%, but now the vacancy rate, at least here in Winnipeg at the time of this recording, is only 0.98%. So there's a lot of factors. It's not that easy. And, you know, something comes to mind because I would say every person, almost every person, but if you're listening to this, nod your head. Most people are going to choose the amount of rent that they want to get based on their expenses. So based on their mortgage, their property taxes, their insurance, maybe the property management fee if you're getting it professionally managed, right? Maybe you work in condo fees if it's a condo. Maybe you're paying hydro and water because it's a duplex. Like whatever your costs are, most people just add those up, add $200 to it, and then that's the market rent that they want to choose. But again, you could be too high, so now you have a vacancy, or you could be too low and now you're leaving money on the table. So it's super, super important to don't scrimp on this. Like put a lot of time and effort into it because it is the single most important thing for you. Now, what happens if the market rent analysis, either from our company, from realtors, or you just put the property out there for, again, $2,000 and it just won't rent? And the sweet spot happens to be 1,600. You have to then decide, did I buy the wrong property? Do I need to do renovations to get it up to $2,000? And maybe it's already renovated and you're maxed out. Well, I'm sorry. I've always said your rental property is a business and your property is the inventory, okay? If you're selling if you own a grocery store or you own an electronics store and you can't sell that jug of milk for $6, what's going to happen? You're going to have to lower it to $5 or $5.50. And if your competitors are selling for $4.99, guess what? You might have to drop it to $4.99 or even $4.75 so that you can sell that jug of milk before it expires. Well, it's no different than a rental property. So as a landlord, if you can't get the amount of rent to cover your expenses, you're going to either it's a business, you're going to have to lower your expenses or you're going to have to get rid of the asset. Now, nothing wrong with getting rid of the asset and then choosing to buy another piece of inventory that does cash flow for you. Okay, so there's a lot of things. So number one, like I said, check rental listings in your area for similar properties, speak to property managers, make sure that you're not just going and looking at what people are trying to rent for, but look at what is currently renting. And that could be even involved in calling these landlords, getting their number, and then calling them back a month later, right? If they're willing to take your call and say, hey, this is Garret. I called you a month ago. Just wondering if you were able to rent the property, and if they were, what did it finally rent for? Because that is current data. So that's a nugget for you there. All right. You want to also adjust for the amenities of the rental property. Okay. Are you including utilities? Does it have a large yard? Do you have snow clearing and grass cutting included? Is there underground parking if it's a condo or an apartment block? Is it above ground parking? Does the apartment building or the condo have common areas, a rooftop patio, a workout room, free parking, free laundry, coin-up laundry? Like there's so many things. So what we do when we are doing these comparative market analysis, very, very similar to what you see in a real estate appraisal. We will take a rolling average. Okay, so let's say that somebody comes to us with a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a full finished basement in a certain neighborhood. We will look at other properties if we can and compare to those. But let's say that the only property that we have there are all 4 bedrooms with, again, let's say 4 bedrooms is the only difference. 4-bedroom, 2-bath, finished basement. And the comparable property, my client's property, is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, finished basement. Well, now maybe the average rent on the other properties of 4 bedrooms is $2,500. We're now going to have to adjust and take away value for that 4th bedroom. So we actually here, if we go behind the algorithm, we do actually have an online rent calculator on our website. And the math behind that is taking that rolling average and then adding or subtracting amenities. Okay, this property is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Okay, great. Does it have a detached garage, an attached garage, single, double, or a parking pad, right? And then we're assigning values to that. Maybe a parking pad is worth $50. Maybe a garage, double garage, attached garage is worth $200. A detached garage where you have to walk through the cold here in Winnipeg out to the back lane maybe is worth $125. So when you've been doing it as long as we have, you can kind of figure out what those amounts are, but it doesn't matter. If you're listening to this, you have just one house, you can still do this. Look at, again, what is advertising right now, compare it to what you have. Maybe you've just upgraded the kitchen and the only comparable just down the street has a 1970s kitchen. Add $100 to that. Maybe they have the blue and pink tile in the 1960s bathroom, and you've got the rain shower and glass doors, add $75, right? So once you can kind of do all of that, the other thing is just look at the market, okay? What is your current vacancy rate? What is the supply and demand? And what season is it? Now, what do I mean by season? Well, again, we're in Canada, we're in Winnipeg. This is December. I'm looking out the window right now, and we're in a cold snap, and it's been snowing for like 4 days straight. We are a week and a half before Christmas. So that means the next time that our company is going to be moving somebody in is New Year's Eve. Do you know anybody who would really choose to move on New Year's Eve versus June 30th when school is out and everybody wants to relocate because the kids are finally out of school and you have lots of time to move, clean, get readjusted before the kids start? That is why the most renters are looking in July and August, and that's why there's less people looking in January. If there's less people looking, supply and demand, there's more, let me see if I've got this right, supply and demand. So there's less people looking, less demand, more supply. That's going to drive the price down of your rental property. So all things being equal, you might get $2,000 in July, you might only get $1,800 in January. And you know what? It is what it is. That's okay. My advice, and this is kind of a footnote, if you are advertising something in January, see if you can get the tenant to agree to maybe a shorter term lease with an amendment to a longer term, maybe in the summer. It's better for you, it's better for them. And then if they don't renew their lease, at least it's turning over in the summer and you don't have to take the hit temporarily for this $200 or $300 fluctuation, okay? Annual adjustments. What should you do when the rent comes up, the lease comes up for renewal? Now, I'll preface that by saying it really depends on what state or province you're in, because some state or provinces are not what they call landlord friendly, and you can't actually increase the rent unless it's by a prescribed amount. For example, here in Manitoba, Canada, the Residential Tenancies Branch, so the Manitoba government, is going to release the allowable rent increase. And if you're in a landlord-friendly state or province, you're probably shaking your head right now. But the province of Manitoba, every September, October, will release the allowable percentage that a landlord is allowed to increase the rent with 3 months' notice. This year, in 2025, it's only 1.7%. When you consider the cost of inflation, 1.7% doesn't even come close to cutting it. And that's where you need to have a lot of knowledge, hopefully by this podcast or our Rent It Yourself online community, where you can now navigate that landscape and try to figure out how you can get around those rent increases, either by doing key renovations and applying for a rent increase above guidelines if you're in Manitoba. Maybe you've built in discounts into your leases. You can always ask us about that privately and DM us, or maybe I'll do a future podcast on that. So that would be when you've got a rent registered at a higher amount, you discount it to an amount payable. The government comes along and says, oh, we're only allowing you a 1.7% increase, and you can take a 10 or 15% increase because you're removing part of that discount. That's a strategy that we've used for decades to protect our investors. But it still all comes down to, if you increase it too much or take away a discount, even if you're allowed to increase it, at the end of the day, if you're greedy and you're trying to get too much, your tenant's going to leave, and that is still going to cost you money. Okay. So you want to reassess your rent annually based on inflation, improvements, what the market is currently doing. And then honestly, speak to your tenant. What are their plans? What are their financial situations? If they've been with you for 3 or 4 years, don't forget, a successful tenancy is not just collecting the rent. A successful tenancy, pardon me, is the tenant's ability to pay. Okay, that's pretty obvious. But also, are they respecting the property, and are they being a good neighbor? So, if you have somebody who is, I don't know, I'll just say, a drug dealer, and they can afford whatever rent you throw at them, but they're leaving needles everywhere, and they've got a parade of 100 people walking through the building at 1 o'clock in the morning doing their drug deals, and they're rough on the property, they're not a perfect tenant, right? You might have somebody who's just struggling a little bit, but they're respectful, they've got a good family, they're trying to do the right thing, they've been with you for 5 years. Maybe you want to give them a $50 break and have a lifetime tenant for you. What is that going to mean? And it also feels pretty good because we're all human here and trying to do the right thing. And like I said, it's not only about cash flow. That tenant is still paying down your mortgage, and the property, hopefully, if you're in the right market, is still increasing in value every year. So that's really the true profit of these long-term buy and hold rental properties. At any rate, I'll summarize by saying finding the right rent price ensures profitability while keeping your property competitive in the market. So I've talked a lot about rental calculators. We do have one on our website, but I will say that, if you're interested, we have developed out a rental pricing calculator, a simple tool that can help you set the perfect rent price for your property. So click the link in the show notes and we'll give you access to it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.